Yes.
Yes.
I am good. I'm good. Good to see you, Dan, Vlad, Gabriel. Good to be here again at CodeCamp.
Awesome. So, well, you have the floor. Let's not delay the inevitable.
Okay, so I have a few extra minutes. That's good. Let's see if I can share my screen. Let's see if that's going to work. So which one do I need to share? Can you see my screen?
Personally, yes. But
yes, it's live.
Yeah, it's live.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just start my timer here. So this talk is about a strategic approach to software modernization. So I'll try to answer some of Dan's questions. So as a company, we are a consultancy, and we build a lot of software for clients. And in the past few years, we've been involved in quite a few projects that we classify as software modernization projects. So this talk is about, it's not very technical. This talk is more about how do we even create a case for that? How do we tackle strategically a modernization project? So first of all, let's try to have a look at what a modernization, software modernization is, right? So the way I like to define it is software modernization is the continuous process of improving strategic systems in order to increase business agility. It's a mouthful, but what I want to, with this description, what I want you to make sure is that a software modernization initiative is something strategic. It's not something about paying small technical debts in small increments, like, oh, I want to refactor this piece of code, or I want to add some testing here. It's far more strategic than that. And it's also a continuous process. It's not something that starts and ends. Any company that that relies on systems or strategically relies on systems, they would need to have this continuous improvement program where software modernization is part of it. So let's ask ourselves, why do we fail to make a case for it? So it's quite common in large organizations to have a lot of people unhappy about the current state of their systems or their delivery process. So the business is complaining that they don't get their features fast enough. The developers are a bit upset because the code is a mess or the technology is old, and that prevents them to do a good job. The testers are not able to guarantee the quality of the systems, and so on and so forth. You have all those problems that everyone can. If you ask everyone if they are happy, everyone will have something to criticize. So if we are in this state, why are we not able to make a case for a software modernization project? Why are we always begging for time to do small things? And one of the reasons that I felt is that we are too quick into discussing solutions before agreeing on the problems. This is a very typical developer problem. I'm a developer myself, and so my initial how can I say, strategy is to go to the business and say, hey, I need some time to do some refactoring or to add some tests. This is not a good idea. This is not, you are coming up with a solution without having the business agreeing on the problem. So this talk is all about that, is how can we create this alignment and use the right motivators to drive a modernization strategy. So I'll take you through some of those things. So there is, first of all, some foundational knowledge that you need to have, and those are related to the main business reasons for software modernization, right? So I came up with 6 of them. There's probably more, but those 6 are they are quite how can I say, you can fit a lot of the things into those 6 reasons or drivers for modernization. I'll go through very quickly one by one before we move on. So every time if you want to talk about modernization, you need to think about what is the business reason. So one of them is sustainable change. So embracing change is key in software development. There is also that saying that says that change is the only constant in software development. right? So every time that you think about automated tests or clean code or modular architecture, test-driven development, all of that, CI/CD, all of that are solutions. And what you are trying to do is to achieve business-wise sustainable change, right? We want to reduce lead time, produce features faster, so on and so forth. So another driver is innovation. A lot of businesses, they would like to do a lot of new things, but it's very expensive to innovate. If your house is on fire, if your systems are falling apart, there's no way that you have time to innovate. So being able to structure your systems in order to stay competitive and innovate is another drive, right? So how can you articulate that? Your system needs to the underlying technology or architecture of your systems needs to make it easy for us to experiment, right? So to have shorter feedback loops. So that is the kind of driver that you can use while pushing modernization. Another one is leverage technology, right? So using new technology should be straightforward and not like a scary prospect, as we say. And why would you want to do that? Because we want to benefit from, for example, you want to reduce your costs, or you want to make it safer for you to deploy. So when you talk about serverless architecture, cloud solutions, elastic scaling, so all of those things are solutions to business problems. So you are leveraging those technologies to make more stable systems or reduce cost and so on and so forth. Business alignment. Quite often, the way that the systems are architected, they don't match how the business is structured, which means that different business areas or different parts of the business, when they want to innovate or they want to build new features, not always is so easy because the systems are all entangled. And there are a lot of impediments that are beyond the area asking for the change. So another reason to drive modernization is this business alignment or the alignment between business and technology. Make sure that we break those silos and we align the structure of our systems to the structure of our business, right? So that's another drive. One that is very interesting when we talk about those business drivers for modernization is people. So a lot of companies would like to attract talent and retain talent, but it's very difficult to do that when you are using very old technologies or your development process is not very good. So if it's very painful to release software to production. So it's very difficult to have a culture of learning in a place where that doesn't recognize the need of the evolution or evolving to new technologies and modernizing their systems. So attracting and retaining people is also another drive for modernizing systems. And risk management as well, which is a big one. So for example, risk management must be done by design with modern technologies and well-designed systems, right? So it cannot be done as a second thought. So it's very difficult to, for example, be compliant to regulations or tackle security, monitoring, scalability, all of those things, if you don't do that strategically. And all of those things, they pose a risk to the business if they are not taken care of. So once again, in order to minimize business risks, is another reason, we should modernize our systems as well. So these 6 areas create a foundation knowledge that we need to have before we even start talking about solutions. So we need to have this business awareness, I would say, before we even try to drive technical change. So this is a different way of thinking about that. If you want to really drive technical change, and again, there is a big difference between driving technical change in an organization and just trying to refactor a piece of code, right? If you want to drive technical change, we as developers, we need to have business awareness. And that's not only for developers, but also product owners, project managers, anyone in the middle management that needs to make a case for the senior management to drive the change. They need to have this awareness. So we also have, so those are the drivers, but there is also common impediments, right? So for modernization. So let's say lack of time, lack of money, lack of skills, overwhelmed by problems. There are so many problems in there that people don't even know where to start, right? So there is also fear, a fear of the unknown, right? A fear of breaking something, of increasing the risk. Maybe they tried things in the past and it didn't work. And because of that, now they were burned. So they don't want to try it again, or they are very skeptical about that, right? Another common impediment, and they say, well, if we do that, we are gonna disrupt business as usual, as Dan was saying at the beginning. So if we start putting a lot of effort in modernizing systems, we are not really getting a new feature. So, but I have a lot of other things to do. So how can I balance that, right? So, or we had a few people from one of our new clients. One of the helps that they needed, they needed a help to make a case. They know what needs to be improved. They know what is wrong with the system, but they cannot create a business case for that. And then, of course, you have lack of capacity. So sometimes you have the skills, but you don't have people, or you have don't have the technical vision for that. So those are fundamental knowledge that you need to have even before considering driving a change. And then there are the principles of software modernization, and those principles are important because people are a bit scared of software modernization, and it's our job to mitigate some of their concerns, right? So, and for that we need to, if you want to drive a software modernization initiative, that needs to be underpinned by a few principles that I call. So, for example, one of them is what I call big vision, small increments. So when you are modernizing a system or an area, like, you need to have a big vision, right? So again, you are creating something that is strategic for the company. So we are looking ahead a few years, right? But we will do that in small increments. So you need to create a big vision, a place that you aspire to be at. That's where you'd like to be if you have no constraints. But we will do that one small increment at a time. Those increments need to be value driven. So that means that every increment that we have needs to bring some value to the business. Another key thing about software modernization initiatives, it needs to provide to have minimum or even no business disruption. And this is a challenge, but it's a principle. It's a principle that we should try to follow, right? So excellence within pragmatic solutions. So this is a very interesting thing as well. We are modernizing for a reason, because there is lack of quality, or over time things got entangled, and so we want excellence, but excellence needs to be contained. So when you are modernizing, you need to have a pragmatic solution for the improvement, and excellence will happen within the boundaries of the pragmatic solution. It cannot just be unbounded. We are chasing excellence without boundaries. So another key thing, if it's not broke, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So this is very important. There's absolutely no reason whatsoever to start refactoring or re-architecting areas of the system, or different services or whatever, if there's no business value. If you cannot justify the business value, you should not touch it. And then another one that is very important is the law of diminishing returns. What it means is we can go, as we start improving things, at some point, if you go too far, we start getting less benefit from it. So basically what it says is, like, when do you stop, right? So I think that you need to balance that very well. So sometimes it's the Pareto's law, like you improve 20% of your application, that will create an 80% of benefit. But if you try to get the last 20% of benefit, you need to do 80% of the work. So balancing that is important. So those are principles. So with all of that in mind, the common drivers and impediments for software modernization initiatives and the principles, we are now ready to start trying to drive the change, right? So that's where the strategic approach comes in. I divide them in 5 areas. First of all, we need business alignment. And then so the first 2, business alignment and technical alignment, means that we need to agree on the problems and the things that we want to improve. I'm going to cover them a little bit in more details a little bit later. So this is extremely important. Without those business and technical alignment, we cannot create a strategy. So this again is the same mantra that I was saying before. We should not discuss solutions before agreeing on the problem. So if you want to drive technical change, everyone, all the stakeholders, they need to be clear of what you are trying to solve and what would be the return if we solve that. And then once we have that alignment, we will create a technical vision. With that vision, we need a strategy to get to that vision, and then an implementation. So that is the strategic approach. I'm going to go into more details of what those things really mean, right? So let's look at the business alignment first. First things first, make the software modernization initiative focused. Everyone's scared of spending too much time or too much money or disrupting and stuff. So the modernization initiative is a continuous improvement program. Remember that it's a continuous activity, but you can have multiple initiatives in this continuum process, right? So, but they need to be focused. So for example, this is an example of a client that we have. They have a gigantic system, millions and millions lines of code, and they have a huge ecosystem of systems. We took their main system, we divided in 16 areas. All of those things are workshops that we run and that you all should run with your own teams and stakeholders and stuff. So we first divided the application in 16 very high level areas, and then we broke those 16 areas in many other smaller areas. And then we had 3 different initiatives, and the criteria that we use to select them varied immensely. So this is important. So you need to make it focus, and we need to have a criteria to select. So for example, the first area that we selected to run the modernization initiative was to create a proof of concept or an exemplar project. So there were a lot of unknowns. We didn't know if some of the things that we wanted to do would work or not. So the first initiative we took was take a safe area that needs improvement, but is still quite safe, quite small, quite self-contained. And we ran a few experiments in there, and we stabilized that area. But that was an area. So the goal, the value was to validate an approach. The next 2 areas that we took, they were different. Some of them we were tackling risk management or compliance with regulations. Others we were tackling the instability of the area, had a lot of bugs or difficult to maintain. So it's important that the first thing we do with the business is to create a focus and understand, everyone needs to understand why you are focused on that area and what you want to improve. Once you have that focus, once you chose that smaller area, we need to start running a few workshops with the business to understand what are the main features of that area. It sounds silly, but as soon as you put a lot of different stakeholders, people from business, product owners, architects, testers, production services, and you ask them, what does this system do? Or what does this area of the system do? They'll have different views of the main features. So you need to align the main features and flows. Then you need to also look at the pain points and desired improvements. So each one of those people, right? So from, again, product managers, the director of the area, the testers, the developers, each one of those people have a completely different view of pain points and the respective desired improvements. So you need to dig into those things. Why do they consider that a pain point? How do you prioritize them? Also, if they want to improve something, why do they want to improve? What they're trying to get out of that improvement? And then you also need to dig deeper a little bit into the path to production. Normally, this is where you do a value stream mapping. A value stream mapping is a fantastic exercise. So basically, it maps from an idea all the way to software in production, all the steps that happen. This is the result of one of the workshops we've done in our clients. So we need people from all the different areas, as I mentioned before, the tester, production services or operations or whoever. No one in the entire company had an idea, had seen that this is their process, from an idea to production. At the end of an hour and a half, they were looking at it like, wow, we had no clue. We had so much waste, so many steps, so many rework. in our process. So this is a great source to bring everyone together, so everyone has exactly the same understanding, and this will serve as a source of things that you want to improve with your initiative. So up until now, we've been looking at the business as in terms of the current state of the business, and we are creating that shared understanding. But we also need to look further. Where is that area of the business is going? So do they have a portfolio or milestones and goals or backlogs? So we need to have a look at that in those things and understand what does the business want to do in this area moving forward, because our modernization initiative can be created in order to support the evolution of the system. So everything that they want to do, that's going to be very hard to do without the modernization. So we can create a strategy to support that vision for the business. Or there are other things that we need to prioritize, and we need to create a modernization strategy that will not disrupt the work being done on the strategic side of the business. So there are different approaches. So we need to understand that as well. Another thing that is important, understanding business constraints, right? So we have external deadlines, or money, or SLAs, regulations, certifications, even lack of skills and structures. So it's important to understand those things and also differentiate from immovable constraints to and made up constraints, right? So an external deadline, certifications, regulations, SLAs, those are immovable constraints. You need to deal with them. Whatever you do, you need to respect those things, right? But there are other things that might be, for example, company structure, internal deadlines. Some of them will be immovable, like you're not going to change a full organization and reorganize their departments. That's not going to happen. But maybe there is something much smaller within that area that we could break some silos. Internal deadlines, the same thing. So it is important to have a conversation with everyone else in a workshop and define what are the immovable things, and whatever our solution will be, we'll need to respect those constraints. And then, of course, we have some metrics as well. There's some different ways of looking at business goals. There are the common ones, the OKRs, KPIs, and so cost reduction, sales increase, all this kind of things. Those are the normal ones. But there are modern metrics for modernization efforts. This is coming from a book called Accelerate, and you can also search them for, if you search for the current state of DevOps, you will end up finding those things. So those are 4 metrics that we like to use a lot in our modernization projects. Is how often can we deploy, so can we increase that? The lead time, so from when the software is finished by the development team finishes the coding, how long does it take to production? Is it just less than an hour or take up to months, right? So all of those data in this table comes from scientific evidence, well, all the research that they've done. I extremely recommend you reading the Accelerate book, and you will see all the science behind that, all the studies and everything else. But those are metrics. For example, minimum mean time to restore. When something goes wrong in production, how fast can we fix? Normally, this is going to be with a roll forward. We release a new version instead of trying to do a rollback, right? So change of failure rate. So are we reducing bugs and stuff like that? So those are quite cool 4 metrics that are used. So up until now, we looked at business, right? So we are trying to make this alignment between business and understand what they perceive as a problem and what the perceived improvements, how can we measure that? But we also need to do that with technology. So as we select an area, we need to look, first of all, this area, how does it fit in the wider ecosystem? So that's the architectural view, right? So that area or that system or that service, how does it fit into the wider ecosystem? Then you need to start going deeper, right? So you look at the main components, the internal design of that area, and then you end up looking at the business flows. So you start mapping business flows to the internal components of that area. Quite often those areas have conceptual components, but not actual components. What do I mean by that? There are conceptual areas, but the system itself, the way that it's designed and structured, it doesn't represent the conceptual modules. So then here again, we do the same thing that we've done for the business. We look at the pain points. So why are they painful? Right, so what kind of pain? So when you say, oh, this is difficult to maintain, what do we mean by that? Right, so, or desired improvements, why do we want to improve? What do we expect to be changed if we made that improvement? Technical constraints, I'm going to go a bit deeper into it. And the risks of modernizing. So this is very interesting. For example, one of our biggest modernization projects is in the healthcare industry, and they have an extremely complex system. So modernizing that imposes a lot of risks, right? Because we may forget certain things, and that can be quite catastrophic. But let's look at some of the technical constraints. So what we're trying to do up until now is to have this alignment, having this big understanding, so that we can create a technical vision and then a strategy, right? So that's why it's important to look at all those different aspects. For example, one of our clients, they cannot be multi-tenant. What does it mean? They cannot just have a website and have all their clients accessing their website. Their product, which is extremely complex, is deployed on-premise in thousands of their clients, and the cloud solution that they have needs to be multi-instance, which means that each of their clients need to have their own instance of the system and the database. On top of that, they are in a heavily regulated environment and have SLAs and stuff. Why this is important? Because understanding, those are technical constraints that we cannot move them. So whatever vision we create, we need to respect that, because there are regulations that we need to be compliant. So these, for example, because of those constraints, that would rule out microservices, and we will end up going for a modular monolith. So this is why it's important for us to understand the technical constraints. So once we have that alignment between business and technology, and we have all those different perspectives, everyone now, business, technology, testers, architects, whoever is part of the stakeholders, at this point, we should have a similar alignment. We should have a similar understanding of all the areas. This is the hardest part. The business and technical alignment is the hardest thing to achieve in any modernization project. But once we are there, we are in a much better position now to start creating a technical vision, because we are now going to create a technical vision and strategy that will satisfy all those things that were discussed before. So one thing that is important is to understand that a technical vision is a direction, not a plan, right? A technical vision is a place where you would like to be. Imagine you have a magical wand and you can say, ping, how would that scenario look like? How would the architecture, the technology, the testing, the deployment, how would you like that to work? And that vision needs to be shared by everyone, right? So you need to start tackling those things. And again, this is a vision, is a direction, not a plan that you're going to follow one step by step. Things that we normally should take into account when creating those visions. Business vision and strategy, business constraints, priorities, some of the metrics, pain points and desired improvements, both on business and technology, constraints, technical constraints, and general inefficiencies. So that is the job. Like when you are creating a technical vision, that's what we need to have in mind. If we cannot satisfy those things, you have a very difficult time trying to convince anyone to invest on this initiative, right? So the chances for you to drive a significant technical change will be significantly reduced if you don't address them, right? Once we have the vision, that's where we developers have more fun, right? So now it's all about, now that we understand the entire concept, we understand where we would like to be, we need to start creating this strategy. And that's when we get to the areas that we are normally more comfortable. That's when you start thinking about, should we rewrite, should we re-architect, should we refactor, is that a hybrid solution? So you need to keep an open mind and make sure that you try to avoid your biases. We all have biases, we all have preferences, but we need to try to make sure that we make an informed decision. So for example, a rewrite is good when you're really changing technologies, but it's my last approach. I would never go for a rewrite unless I'm really changing the underlying technology. But I would struggle to go for a big rewrite. I think it's too risky. Just refactoring code one step at a time is also a bit slow. So normally a hybrid solution tends to be a little bit better, but you will need to, so for example, basically in certain areas you're going to re-architect, certain areas you rewrite, some areas you just refactor, so it is a mix of everything. But you need to discuss, in order to make a decision, you need to discuss advantages and disadvantages and risks on the approach, and bring everyone on board to have that discussion. There are different ways that you can tackle a modernization approach. So basically like going from where you are to the vision, right? I'm going to try to go quickly because I still have quite a few things to cover. So there are many different strategies that you can take to modernize a system from where it is to the vision. One is to get new features. So for example, this is what we've done for one of our clients. They had a payment system that had to be modernized. There were loads of issues with the payment system, but they also had new payment methods that they had to add to the system. So instead of touching what was there and delaying the innovations that they want to bring or the new payment methods, we used the new payment methods that they wanted to bring or to add to the system to create the new architecture or the more modern way of dealing with payments. So we took the two new payment methods and we create the new architecture and the new services to satisfy those payments. And at the front, we redirect. If it's one of the existing payment methods, go to the existing system, do what it was doing before. For the new payment methods, go to this pattern here. And then gradually we started moving one payment method to each payment method to the new architecture. So, or you can just go for a full functional area. There is a functional area of your system that you need to stabilize. Then you can go deeper, understand all the problems in that functional area and start tackling them. You can take business flows as well. So for example, user journey, someone goes into the website, add things, goes to the catalog, add things to the basket, go to the payments and so on. So there is a journey in there. Maybe that's journey, that business flow is not very optimal. So you can take that business flow, can even be processing a trade. It doesn't need to be a visual thing. So, but any business flow, and then the goal of the modernization initiative is to optimize that flow. Right, so usability, sometimes like the interface of the system or the way that the things are displayed and stuff is not very appealing or is preventing users to use the system well. Again, that's another reason. So, or technical components or code hotspots. So maybe there are areas of the system where everyone is always changing and that is making it very difficult for people to work or to segregate work. So maybe you can just go for the code hotspots first. Everything that is more unstable in the code, you go and tackle. So as you can see here, there are many different ways to prioritize the technical strategy in order to get to the vision. So techniques. So you can also do, for example, one of the major one that we're doing at the moment is modular monolith, but you can do monolith to microservices with Strangler Fig pattern. Google for that. This is a thing that Martin Fowler came up with in 2004, evolved since, but it's creating, basically you have a solution. It's similar to what I described on the payment methods, right? Creating new payment methods on top of an existing solution, and then gradually migrating the functionality until you strangle the old flow, let's say. So that's a gradual approach. It's quite nice. Sometimes you just want to separate everything that is the delivery mechanism or front end from the core domain. UI-based flow orchestration. This needs some explaining because this is a name that we created. But sometimes we have the services orchestrating a flow. So we have one service talking to another service that talks to another two services. So this creates a lot of coupling with your services. One way to solve that and have the services more pure is to move all this orchestration to the front end. So then you have the pages, like a separate front end in React or in Vue or whatever, and the page goes and just asks for information of different services. So this has the flexibility to simplify all your backend services. So again, each one of those approaches or techniques will fit a different scenario. So that's why it's important to do all that previous work of understanding the constraints and stuff, and then you choose the right technique in there. Whichever technique you choose, one of the things that will always be present is modularization, right? So at the end of the day, you need to find a way to break a problem into smaller problems. And then you can focus on one area without breaking the others. So modularization is key for any modernization project. And you can do that gradually as well. So you can take an entangled system, focus in a few areas, so then start working on those areas, start bringing the code together. As you start bringing the code together, start putting a kind of an API in front of those services. So creating an interface for that functionality. Gradually start isolating those areas until the point that you can actually stabilize them and really isolate them. That isolation might be microservices, or as I said, it can be just a component, a jar file, a DLL, or whatever else within a monolith, right? But that's the incremental modularization approach. The advantage of modularization: reduce cognitive load, localize and safer change. So this is what is important when you are speaking to business and you want to drive certain technical change. You need to be able to put that into words that make sense, right? So we want to make sure that changes are localized and safer, that when you change one bit, it doesn't break anything else. Also, we want to deploy that, or we want to make it very easy to test, because it's localized is much easier, and we don't need to test the entire application, can just test that bit. And the continuous delivery is not about delivering the entire system all the time. We can just release the components as we are changing them. As long as their interface are preserved, we can release them independently. So this is the kind of language that we need to use to explain to business, right? So, and then parallelize work across teams, so on and so forth, right? So there are quite a few advantages on the modularization. What is a module? A module can be many things depending on the kind of architecture you have. A module can be a group of services. In the case of the payment system that I was saying, the system had a lot of modules, right? There was a payment, there was catalog, there was pricing, there were many other things like stock and so on and so forth. But the payments area was not one system, was a group of services, but it's one component divided in subcomponents within an architecture. Or it can be a single service, can be a library, can be a jar file, or DLL, can be a component, or even a package and namespace, right? So whichever makes sense, but the idea is that they are, whichever granularity you have in your components, they need to be cohesive and loose coupled, right? So that is the end goal. So with that in mind, now we have a common understanding of the business, the technology, we have a vision, we have a strategy. The last bit is trying to understand how we're gonna get there, how we're gonna organize ourselves. So here again, it's context dependent, and there are a few different ways. So in our case, the fastest one, and the one that we use as a company, because we are a consultancy at the end, when we are hired, we have a dedicated team. So a dedicated team that will take one area, will take a problem, and we work on that full time. And this team works in collaboration with everyone else, all the people involved in that area. But this is a more aggressive way and a much faster way because you have a full team dedicated to it. But this is mostly a cross-functional team. This is a little bit different from the specialized team, which is a similar approach, but a specialized team normally is focused in one dimension. There will be a few people with specializing in automate stuff. So we'll do all the DevOps approach or the site reliability engineering, if you prefer a better term, or they are specialized in performance or in database or whatever that is, right? So, or you can have embedded specialists in the team, or in UBS. When I was working for UBS, what we had was our team. We had 20% of our time per sprint to work improvements, and then we would decide what those improvements should be. And then you have many other things. It's just important there's no right or wrong in here because they're all context dependent, but certain approaches are faster and more aggressive. Other approaches are slower and less aggressive. So you just need to balance that. And then make sure that you have an incremental approach, you have roadmap and milestones. Run the initiative project, the modernization initiatives as a project with goals, milestones, continuous delivering things. Don't build up a lot of technical improvements that later you cannot merge into the main line. So those are things you need to be careful. So run as a proper project. So here's a summary again. That's a strategic approach. Business alignment, technical alignment, extremely important. All of those things that I was describing. Visualize bringing those different people into the same room for a few hours, right? So 2 hours, an hour and a half here, an hour and a half there. Create that. It takes some time. It demands a significant effort to do that. But if you are able to do that, you are in a much better place to drive the technical change because everyone now, ideally, after points 1 and 2 and potentially 3, the outcome that you expect is excitement. We expect the business to be excited, the technology to be excited, everyone to be excited. Wow, that would be amazing if we really had that. And then you have a solid strategy to achieve that. So this should get everyone excited. If you fail to do that, well, you fail to do anything else anyway, right? So if no one's excited about it, there's zero chance for you to drive any change, right? So there is, I don't want you I want to go into the questions because I'm already 40 minutes in. So there is modernization at large. So in larger organizations, you might have many different areas or sources of improvements. So you can create what we call a continuous improvement program that has a steering group, and those different functional areas can start providing ideas for initiatives that this group will funnel and understand and question the business value and so on and so forth, create a backlog, and then assign to different teams and so on and so forth. I don't want to dwell too much on this because this is not applicable for a lot of companies, just for very large organizations. So at the end of the day, what you want is to align. So you want to be in a place where all the product ideation, right, or the software ideation, all the business goals are supported well by the way that we architect our systems. And that's why we need to modernize them. So yeah, that's what I had to say. So thank you. So Dan, let me know, do I need to stop sharing my screen? So what do I do now to go for the questions?
I think you can keep sharing the screen. Our resident producer Gabriel will send the stream live. Oh, look, there's us. We have a couple of questions to ask. So if it's okay, we're gonna read them and well, you get the chance to answer them.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm gonna go with the first one, which I think is 2 questions in one. So the first thing would be, what do you think about continuous modernization within a system?
I think it's essential. As I was saying before, any system, any company that relies on a strategic system, that system should be continuously improved. And hopefully, if they have that approach, they will never need a big bang modernization initiative.
Exactly. The thing is, and this was on top of my mind as well, especially because you mentioned heavily regulated environments. And on a lot of occasions when you talk to such companies that are working in these environments, and they say, yeah, we cannot do it differently. So we're going to do now a big bang, it will work for 3 to 5 years, and then we're going to do it again, and so on. And then, but how do you get the message across? How do you align this, the business part and
Yeah, I have I work in quite a few regulated environments, including we have 2 clients in regulated environments right now as well. And an interesting thing about regulated environments is that the regulations are always used as an excuse not to do things in a better way. But if you ask them what precisely the regulations say, where is the document? I would like to read the document that defines what is the regulation, what we need to be compliant with. No one knows. We cannot even find the documents. Right, so this is what, because no one knows, they end up creating those policies. It's like, I don't know exactly what we need to do, but let's create a policy that we will guarantee that you're not going to break it. So one of the first things I would do is try to understand what the regulators really say, and then try to, not to do more things that will make us slow if we don't need to.
I think your answer kind of touches on the follow-up question too a bit, because basically the question was continuing with open source is constantly pushing new updates on the software, so open source software development, and said updates contain various fixes which may or may not affect the business requirements until they do. So basically they start accruing features, but that might hamper further development progress. And the question was, do you think this is a smart move, or is it just a delay in estimating, in time estimation for tasks?
I'm not sure if I understood correctly. I'll tell you what I understood in a summary. If our application was relying on open source, the evolution of the open source might impact our application. Is that what it means?
I think that's a partial thing. Also, I think it's also about open source development in particular. So about just adding features that are not necessarily connected with the main business goal of the project.
Well, okay, so there are quite different things. I'll see if I can address what I understood. So one area that we discussed was how open source products, when we use open source products, how much they can impact us. So one of the things that we need to try to isolate them as much as possible. I normally have a much bigger preference for libraries instead of frameworks, because then I can keep the libraries contained and easily replace them. A framework is much harder. But if you're building, for example, something on top of an open source CMS, for example, as I've seen in a lot of clients, you have a risk. You will start much faster because you can use that CMS almost out of the box, but as the thing evolves, it will impact you. It's the risk that you have. But in terms of maintaining the open source, then it's a bit different. I think that every open source project, normally they do have a steering committee, people that maintain, that are the core drivers, they have the vision for that open source, and they should make sure that all the contributions are aligned to where they want to go.
Yeah, I think basically it's how you run a project, right? Just to make sense, making sure everything is aligned. Thank you for this. I think Dan also published a couple of questions just now.
Yeah, there are several questions. Maybe if you have a couple of minutes to spare, you can jump in there and maybe text yourself. But I'm going to ask one more. As nowadays people are obsessed, well, between brackets, about microservices. Are they key to software modernization from the architectural and technical perspective? What's your view on this?
No, I think that, as I was saying, like our biggest modernization project at the moment, we cannot even use microservices. It would make our life extremely hard, mainly because of the complexity in our production environment. Because it needs to be deployed on premise, and it needs to be multi-instance and cannot be multi-tenant. Because of that, those significant constraints that we have, microservices would be terrible for us. It would make we have tens, almost 14,000 installations of the software. Imagine if that was loads of services. It would be crazy. So what I think is key is the modularization. But if the modules will be an independent service or just like a well-defined group of classes within a package, that for me is a detail. But modularization is, but not microservice.
All right. Yeah. Makes sense for me. Vlad also agrees. Hates the things anyway.
I'm the slow guy. All right, I think we published some more questions, but I think our time slot is up. So if you could please, as Dan said, just take a look at the question, and maybe if you have the time, try to answer them. And now,
other than that, thank you, Sandro.
Sure, my pleasure. Thank you.